Like that's where we need to start monitoring, and we need to increase that number. And then we can start to look at following up with persistence in post-secondary education, right? But we need to do better controlling what we can control right now. And that's that application process and making sure that students have a plan in place. Mm-hmm.
So you said there's no cost to this, except in the MOU, does it, what's with the 17,500? Like by
so that's what I talked about. If we choose to move forward, that
Okay.
opportunity exists to do the classroom-based model.
Okay.
But we're at least a year and a half away from implementing that, right? And I would say that when we start to explore what that classroom-based model looks like, I'll want to rely on my counselor ILT to decide what we need. Do we need one goal? Do we need to look at something more like AVID, which is something that many of you who are educators have probably heard of? Do we just update our current counselor curriculum, right? So a lot of options exist with different levels of cost. And I think we need to really figure out what that is before we get to the cost. So that's just in there to inform like what it could look like.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Yep.
My question is that, so you track up to the application process. Once a kid gets accepted, do we have any supports for them to help guide them as they enter into that college process? Or do they apply and then there's no supports after that?
So what we can monitor through Naviance, right? Most students apply through Naviance, which is connected to the Common App. The student then, if once they choose a college, they can go in and self-indicate which college they're attending. I would say that our counselors do a really good job when they're working with students to make sure that they're set up to go on in the next year. They work with students throughout second semester on right now scholarship applications are open, right? So they're doing those sorts of things. But again, that's another self-referred, students have to answer on their own, so the data isn't as clean as it should be. And I think that that's part of our process is we need to figure out how we can close that loop and figure out where they end up going and what support they need to be successful.
I think also what Ms. Lynn was referencing is that like once a senior selects a school and gets accepted, how do we internally support that student through the whole process? And if our counselors work with our senior students through that process, it's in our guidance curriculum, but there is a lot of one-on-one collaboration with the student and the families. And actually, our teachers are very helpful too, because they've been influential with those letters of recommendation. So they also support the students. But I just want to compliment like our opportunity to work with One Goal. I see this as an ability to build capacity with our leadership, and then really it's almost like a self-audit of where we are with our post-second, like college and career readiness. So if we think about MTSS with behavior, attendance, and grades, I think this is another component of it with post-secondary success. So this is an opportunity for us to build our own capacity and then really plan out what we should be delivering to our specifically junior and senior students, but then looking at our guidance curriculum for grades 9 through 12.
And I would just add that, what we talked about today a lot when we did this rubric, it's fresh in my mind because we just talked about it, is you've heard us talk a lot today about the strategic plan and how that informs our work. And pre-COVID was the first year, 2019, 2020, that we had a counseling curriculum. So we were just in the midst of using it, and then the world ended. And so now here we are. This is a really good opportunity to reevaluate what we have on paper and make sure that we're doing it with fidelity.
How many administrators are going to participate in this program? Because we say there's no cost, but it's 3 hours every other month. So there's 18 hours of administrator time wrapped up into this. So how many administrators are we going to have?
It's the 4 people who were named. So Mrs. McDonald, myself, Mr. Randich, and Mrs. Parker.
And then on top of that, we have weekly meetings built into our schedule. So if there's information that they need to share from that learning, that could be shared with all administrators, either during the monthly meeting that Mrs. McDonald has with educational administrators, or with the other 3 weeks a month with all administrators. So that's another way to ensure that information is shared. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Markham, and I know now it's time for your second presentation.
It's cold in here. It should be hot when you're up here doing this, right? But it's freezing. All right, so this presentation will be longer than the last one, and I'm sure that you all will have questions, so please feel free to stop me and ask those. So last month, I came and I presented to you with Dr. Ellis Bowen about some external and immediate requests that we had to meet the needs of our students coming out of COVID, right? And just to give you kind of an update of where we're at with those, we had training scheduled for Carasalis for the snow day. That was rescheduled for this Thursday, so fingers crossed that there's not another snow day, because that resource is ready to go and ready to push out to our families. We have training with Linden Oaks, the Rethink program, on Friday, so that we can start utilizing that program next week. And then we're in the process of connecting the other agency with our behavioral health team. So those things are in progress, and we're really excited to get moving with those. But as we were thinking about those immediate needs, we're also thinking about the better option to support our students is always our own staff, right? That's, in my opinion, always the best way to help our students is with people who they can see on a daily basis. And so this month, what I'm going to talk to you about is expanding our programming and our staffing to meet the needs of our students with our own people, right? So kind of an overview, what I'm going to go through is up here. Some background information, what we're doing now, some data from this school year, because you know I've been talking about data. I'm a big data guy. Maybe it's my doctoral program. I don't know, but I'm really into that right now. And then kind of a review of what we're doing, and then I'll go into the requests for next year. We always start everything with our mission statement, going back to that strategic plan. I'm not going to read these to you. You've heard them 100 times by now. But some key phrases that stick out that apply directly to what we're talking about today in the mission statement. Every student to compete and contribute positively to our community is important. And then in the diversity statement, that last line about the humanity of all people. Those are things that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this presentation. The parameters, again, not going to read them to you. The first 4 bullet points up here all applied to how we ended up here today. Those are all considerations that we made as we came to these recommendations. So we do really, really value those, and we use those to make recommendations. In terms of our beliefs, again, every single one of these applies to what we're talking about. And I would ask you consider these as we go through the current data and the proposals to really keep them in mind that this is what we're trying to accomplish for our students. The culturally responsive culture agreement, which I always stumble over saying, these were approved by the Board of Education in 2019. And I think that the last 2 bullet points especially really apply to this. And I just put this up here to emphasize that this isn't just a result of things that we're doing post-COVID. We were talking about restorative practices pre-COVID. I think it's just important to go back to that and show that we're not being completely reactive here. We were thinking about this before COVID, and now we're just ready to take those next steps. Oh, there's a graphic. Sorry, we stole this from the discipline advisory committee, which we'll get to hear about next month. So just, I put this in here as a reference point. This is our current enrollment by race and ethnicity. I'm going to show you some data later on office discipline referrals and exclusionary discipline. And so I just want to be transparent with that and have this here for you as a reference point, okay? So what do we have in place now to support our students? And again, these are all slides that you've seen. So the next 5 slides are a review of information that we've shared previously. But I do want to articulate a couple of things here. Programs that we're currently offering to support students with a high level of needs would be our Pathways Bravo program for students with anxiety, school avoidance issues, our Gateway to Graduation 2.0 program. Those are 2 smaller environments that we are starting to see success with as we track data. Success looks different when you're talking about your students with your most need, right? So what we might view as successful for our own children might look different, but I think that when we talk about these at the end of the year, we'll have some really positive data to share. We changed our ISS model this year. Used to be the old school 1980s, what you would think of as a detention. Now we're turning it into an intensive student supports room. We're in our first year of using it in that way. So we're working through what that looks like and how we can better support our students. Our home visit liaison team has really started pushing out a lot to this point. I think we're up to 50 home visits to families. And so we're starting to see some of the positive outcomes from that. And I talked earlier about where we're at with our newer programs.
Hey, Brett,
Yes.
so you said you guys changed the ISS model. What does it look like this year? What's different from what was done previously?
So old school ISS, and you worked here, Mr. Henny, so you know that students would go up there, don't sleep, don't be on your phone, and don't be disruptive, right? Now, what we're doing is they're in there, most of the time they're there for the full day, and we trained our ISS supervisors on some restorative practices, some community building circles, some reflective practices to work with students. Our deans, counselors, social workers push into those when needed to maybe do a mediation, maybe have a conversation with a student. And so it's a little more structured because they're there all day. There's more time to work with students and really try to address. Restorative practice is all about root cause, right? So they're able to think about that and try to address that when they can.
And so it's mainly all day. What do we do for some of like the smaller term, smaller issues that are going on? How do we respond to that?
That's a great question. And I think that's one of the growing pains that we're working through, right? So I think we do need to revisit what that looks like. We've started to, as we saw that become more of an issue, the deans are using it for more short-term things, right? So it used to be for ISS, you would miss not just the class that you were sent out of, but also additional classes. We're trying to just use it when we have to use it for a short-term thing like that for the class that the student is struggling in. Because a lot of times that's about helping the student to reflect about why they ended up there and repair that and have them be ready to go back and be successful. Again, there's work to do there for sure. And that's why I say that we still have some things to consider and think through. But overall, in talking to the deans, I get the feeling like this is better and there's still work to do.
Okay.
And then also, we're not losing sight of things like social detentions and lunch detentions in the future, potentially. It's been a capacity issue this year. Also, I do want to highlight that Joliet Central is piloting the cooling, is it
Cool down
cooling off room?
Cool down room.
Cool down room, to help with some of the work that we need to do to support students in the moment.
And Mr. Riley and I were talking about that today, and that is becoming so popular with students that they actually were beyond capacity yesterday. So a problem, but a good problem, that students are taking advantage of those things when they need to.
I was literally just going to ask, what's the data look like on that?
Yeah, no, so right off the bat, sounded like it was highly used, and now just like literally today I was talking to Mr. Riley, and
You
he's
say 287 kids have used it since it started?
And it's important to note, those are teachers, correct, who are working like in their plan period.
So they cover it during,
It
okay.
came out of our MTSS discussions on what we could do additionally to help students right now, to make sure they're not then engaging in a severe behavior because
Okay.
of the way they're feeling or
Yeah.
where they're at because of the situation.
And how much are we, how are we able to kind of identify who needs further training? I know that's kind of like we're trying to get it in this year, so there's not going to be that training there, but what are we offering moving forward for teachers who are interested in being part of that? Like what training do they have for that, or what do we look at for the future for that?
So step one, and we, again, these e-learning days with the snow it's killing me. But we had CPI training for Train the Trainer. And so we were able to train 9 individuals in the district. We now will have the capacity to run that type of training, but then also maybe mediation training and things like that. I think going into the summer, we're going to be able to offer more opportunities for training in person, because last summer we were still in a difficult place with COVID. We're really looking forward to getting back to tracks and summer training and maybe before and after school training. So.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you.
Great questions, thank you. So then the next slide I have up here is our triangle teams. Again, these are all things that we've talked to you all about before. When you think triangle teams, think of like an interdisciplinary team, right? So this is where, and we call them triangle teams based on the roles. Some of them are larger than 3 people, right? And the idea is that counselors, deans, and social workers who share students have the opportunity to talk about their students, what their needs are. So if a dean has a student who comes in with maybe a referral for disrespect, let's say, they can work with their counselor and social worker team to try to intervene with that student differently instead of excluding them from school, right? The triangle teams then have an option, a menu of resources that they can use to support the students. A lot of them are group-based, and this is the menu of groups that we offer across the campuses. These are run by our internal staff, right? So all deans, counselors, and social workers run groups. Some things of note, we quickly reached capacity on these in first semester, which we hope that we can do better on next year. Hopefully the need is a little bit less and we can keep up with the need. In addition to groups, when staff members or when students are waiting for a group or we're not able to get them in a group, counselors and social workers will check in with those students as much as they can to make sure that they're not escalating into a crisis or needing to be referred to our behavioral health teams, which is our next group that I'm going to go over.
And
The
Mr.
behavioral,
Markham,
yeah.
So the people who run those groups are deans, counselors, social workers,
Yeah.
mainly our PPS.
Mhm.
What have we looked at in terms of expanding that out, training some other people? Because it's a big ask for a group that's already responding to a lot of crises throughout the day, a lot of behavioral issues throughout the day, and then to have them scheduled for certain times of meetings to be there. That's, I mean, when I would sub in the dean's office, your day is already packed as it is. So if you're
Right.
scheduled out for a certain amount of time, like what's that look like?
For sure. So we did this summer, we started a training with classroom teachers who wanted to volunteer to do those community building circles, the less curricular based, right? That can just be community building. The challenge there is the logistics, right? So groups are best when they're co-facilitated. And then scheduling around teachers' plan times. And if you schedule it at the teacher's plan time, now the student's missing the same class every week, right? So we intend to eventually get back to that.
Okay.
You just have to work through some of those hurdles to make sure that responding to the social emotional needs of the students doesn't then impact their academic outcomes in that one class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you.
So our behavioral health teams, this is our 5th year, I believe, of behavioral health teams. These were established in partnership with Lurie's Children's Hospital. If you looked at any of the guidance that came out from ISB in May about reopening schools, this is a resource that they were highly recommending to schools. So we were fortunate to be out in front of that because they're in high demand now. The behavioral health teams, again, it's an interdisciplinary team. It includes administrators, school psychologists, social workers, counselors, and deans. They talk about students who are at the highest level of need. They do a screener of the student to determine is the issue a result of trauma? Do they need anger management support? Did they experience a loss in their family? And then they assign from this menu of options that we have to support families. Some of them are group-based and also run by our PPS staff. These are typically run by our social workers who are more clinical-based in their experience. But then we also have partnerships with community agencies to come in and expand what we have available. What I would say there, one of the challenges that our community partners are facing, which is a theme across the country, is staffing issues, staffing shortages. And so when that happens, then we have less ability to meet the needs of our students. So a lot to work through, and that's another reason that some of the recommendations we'll get to, we're hoping to make more internal to our staff. So now I'm going to go into some data of where we're at this school year. So we started this year doing a panorama SEL assessment of our students. The topics that are up here are the topics that were assessed. We collaborated with our school psychologists on which topics they as a team felt would be most important for us to measure. So that's on the left-hand side, the topics. There's a definition of those. The percent favorable for our students who participated, it gives you an idea of how they rated themselves in that area based on the questions. And it's an evidence-based assessment, so they they ask the question multiple times in different ways to try to norm around it, right? And they come to this answer, this percentage. And then on the right is a comparison of our students who took the assessment versus other high school students nationally, right? And so I think when you're analyzing this data, it's important to look at both the middle column and the comparison column to get an idea of where our students are really at. So this is our first year doing it. I think we have work to do with how we utilize this data universally, but it really points to a need to support our students with this. Yes, sir.
So you said the students that participated in it. How did we pick those students? Did they volunteer for it? Was it open to everybody?
Yeah, so we, technically, this is called a survey, and we have, when families register with us, they have to opt in to take surveys, right? And so we have, I want to say 4,000 students who are eligible to take surveys. So only about 2/3 of our students can take it. And then, participation, we just have to make sure that we do a good job of offering it and following through on it. But even at maximum capacity, we have some work to do with making sure that students are able to take it for sure.
So do you know kind of ballpark figure how many kids out of that 4,000 participated in this?
Yeah, we were around half, right, each
Okay.
time. And we've given it twice. So we gave a fall benchmark. We give it on the same schedule as we give the STAR assessments, right? So we gave a fall and we gave a winter, and we were around 2,000 students each
Which is
time.
still a third of our student population. It's pretty good.
Yeah, so it's not perfect. You're not getting an exact picture of where all of our students are at. But again, for us, this isn't about necessarily individual students. It's more about holistically what we need to do to meet the needs of our students.
Third's a pretty decent sample size, though. That was kind of what I was wondering of how much it was.
Yeah,
So,
we're perfectionists here, though. We always want to do better, right?
right, understand.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
this survey is given in our PE, health, and ROTC classes, which complements the social emotional curriculum that we've been delivering in those areas as well. So it's the same areas, like it's the PE, health, and ROTC teachers are the ones that give this, and they'll be giving it again in April.
Yep. All right, so the next piece of data that I wanted to talk through is our behavior incident data. So what I'm gonna make some comparisons to previous years where it's applicable, but what I don't want to do here is compare the number of referrals because we changed how we code things, right? So prior to this school year, if a student reached 5, 8, 10, 12 days absence, they got a discipline referral. We stopped doing that because we're trying to move away from punitive consequences for minor things. So that's a hard number to compare. Some of the breakdowns of this data, 22% of our students have at least one referral, 12% of our students have multiple office referrals. Many of them, I put the number and percentage on here for unauthorized presence. You'll remember that when we talked about tardies, that those excessive tardies, more than 5 minutes, we're coding as unauthorized because that's the most logical place for it to fit in our current discipline policy. But unauthorized could be something you're 5 minutes late to class, or it could be you opened a door for somebody, which is a much more significant issue, right? So some work for us to do there, because I would consider that a severe incident, right? We don't need people in our building that we don't know who they are. So we'll want to work on clearing up that data a little bit. 468 of these incidents were for what we consider severe. What do we consider severe? Assault, battery, fighting, harassment, intimidation, bullying, instigation, mob action, sexual harassment, student violence, substance abuse, and weapons. Okay, so we've had 468 incidents under those categories. And then on the right, you can see the pie chart of students who are receiving referrals, very disproportionate to our enrollment, right? I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I also think that when I show you the next slide, which is on exclusionary discipline, it aligns to this more than it does our student enrollment, right? So we have a lot of work to do. When you look at exclusionary discipline, this number I can compare to previous years, right? Because exclusionary discipline is defined by the state as out-of-school suspension or expulsion. So to give you some context, you can see we've had 657 exclusions this school year. In 2018-2019, that was 635. And in 2019-2020, it was 693. We can use that school year for this data because we were in school through January, right? So we're on track with similar numbers of exclusions, which is not where we want to be, right? I would also add that of these exclusions, so there's 657 exclusions, 439 students have been excluded, which means that 30% of those students have committed another suspendable offense and been suspended. That'll be important when we talk about one of the recommendations.
Brett, do you have the data to show the difference between like our shorter term exclusionary discipline, out of like B15 versus B20? Is that 4 to 10 day? So anything like 1 to 3 day, like how's that breakdown look out of this 657 cases? Are we, again, we're obviously trying to limit those days out. So are we more heavier on the shorter term disciplines versus the longer term disciplines?
I think we'd have to compile that, but based on memory and like looking at it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
On a monthly basis, we have more 1 to 3s than we have 4 to 10s.
Okay.
But that is just going off of memory and everything. We'd
Right.
have to
Pull
look
the
at
actual
that.
data.
Yes,
Okay.
we would.
And I have it, it's in the same report, right? So like I can get that for you.
Okay.
I feel a little bit like Rain Man saying all these numbers, so I apologize,
I
but
understand.
I can definitely get that for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, the last piece of data I wanted to show is our substance abuse and possession referrals, which I showed you last month, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I did provide a historical comparison. So 2018, 2019, through January, we had 82 referrals for substance abuse, 2019, 2020, 95, and this year we're up to 167, right? So a significant increase. Some things that have changed in January of 2020 is when cannabis was legalized in the state of Illinois. So that's definitely a factor. Also, I'll show you in a second a slide with some research that I did on some of these causes. There's definitely a correlation between not being in school and substance use. So all of those things factor into this, but 167 referrals for substance abuse to me indicates that we need to do something different. Yeah, absolutely, I can get that for you. Mm-hmm.
I can send that out to the board when Brett compiles those. Yep.
Yep. So what did we learn from the data? Okay, I've talked about a lot of these things already, but I do really want to emphasize the last bullet point because we had a long conversation about this in our administrative team. All of the recommendations that I'm going to make are responsive in nature, right? So what our data really points to is that we have a universal problem generally. We need to be more proactive, and that's something that we are going to continue to work on. I think our MTSS teams will be a huge help with that. And we need to continue doing better with that stuff. But in the immediate future, we need to also have opportunities to support our students. And so that's why we're making these recommendations today. I just wanted to point out that and acknowledge that we do have a broader problem than we can respond to with our PPS staff, even with these additions. But as we work on those things, we also still, I feel, have a responsibility to meet the need of every student, remember, from our mission statement. So just wanted to point that out. Again, this is some additional research, I think, because I'm working on my dissertation presentation on some things that are important, and also just to show you that these aren't things that we're just coming up with on a whim. There's research to show that exclusion, whether it's 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, an expulsion, doesn't change a student's behavior. Our students, when they're excluded, still live in our community. And so I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we're trying to help them and support them in changing their behavior. And that's the recommendations here. And then that last bullet point talks about truancy and the increased risks of marijuana use by adolescents. So there's a lot of fascinating research on it that I just wanted to point out. This isn't just us as a team of administrators on a whim thinking that we have a solution. There's research to show that school exclusion doesn't work.
I'm trying to think of the appropriate words, because we continue to see the same trend. And your first bullet says many students need support. I would like to, because of the mix match in the demographics, I would venture to say I think teachers also need to improve some things, and I would like to see that in the data as well. I don't know what it is, but our teachers need to be able to relate to all of our students and not just a certain group. And so, because of the difference in the populations with the teaching staff and the students, I just think something more needs to be done. I've been here 3 years and I'm seeing the same data, and I know that this work was started before I got here. So that's just a concern of mine.
One of the things that we're gonna do next year, similar to finding success with the cultural responsiveness cohort, is our plan is to run 2 restorative practices cohorts, specifically aimed at teachers, classroom teachers. We think that would allow us to build a capacity of around 65 to 75 teachers in 1 year, which would be huge. It's more intense than just school improvement day awareness type pieces, and we're working out a plan right now that we would bring to the board for approval with what that would look like. But since we found success with the cultural responsiveness cohort, we think that an option like that would be very helpful. And then the way that we can measure and see who needs help is, like you said, look at the data as our student data, but also look at our data with teachers to see maybe, is there more referrals written in a certain area of the building? Is there referrals written in a certain content area? Are there referrals written like specifically about certain things like disrespect and things like that, that we can intervene more and provide people with the support they need? So that's the goal of the restorative practices cohort.
So my question to build off of that, Dr. Guzman, is when you say we're measuring success of the programs, are we asking students if they see a difference in how their teachers interact with them? Because to me, that is what ultimately says success. And I think that kind of hits on what Mrs. Smith was saying.
That's why we're redoing that cultural survey with Hanover. We did it in 2019. That was pre-COVID. So we do anticipate our data being different on the basis of COVID too. But that is a climate and culture survey, relationship survey. There's very specific questions about how students feel about their working with their teachers and the support they're getting from not only the adults in the building. And so those surveys are scheduled to close on March 1st. And then Mrs. McDonald and I met with Hanover, and they should have the analysis to us by the end of April. And that's information that we can utilize as we're going into strategic planning, and then also use it as baseline data. And then hopefully we can get to where we were trying to get before with focus groups with students, because we had a plan that we were going to implement when COVID hit. So that's how we plan to get the student voice and student perspective. I will tell you right now, we're also surveying parents, but our response rate for both 5 Essentials as well as the Hanover survey, we're not getting a lot of parent returns, but we will get staff perception data as well as students.
Well, that's important, because I think the student response to that, how they feel, is what's most important, especially in a restorative approach, because to restore means to bring it back to its original state, right? So if they don't feel like there's an original relationship there, what are you restoring in the first place? So that, I think that's going to be a really important piece for us to understand, is how the students feel. So thank you for that.
Sorry, I have another question. So, how different cultures handle social, emotional processes, and how they handle like counseling and things like that is different. So, is there an approach to different students or different cultures within the school, and how we approach these different services?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because that's true. That's the conversations that I have with the counselors and social workers. A lot of their time with families is working with them to make sure that they're comfortable. And that takes a lot of time, right? So we talked about the Care Solace support that we're looking to bring in. And the hope there is that instead of our staff trying to spend the time to work through that, because it is time consuming, right? Like, you're able to overcome that by working with a family, because all parents, regardless of their background, want to help their kids. It just takes time to overcome that barrier, right? The stigma associated with mental health supports. It's time consuming. So we're hoping that Care Solace is an opportunity to take that burden off of our staff, so that our staff can work with the students, and Care Solace can work with the families to connect them to the support they need. We'll see the effectiveness of that. We'll be able to look at that data, but that's where we're heading right now. All great questions. And I would say, Mrs. Stiff, the data point that you're looking for is when you look at that office referral data, the 468 severe incidents are the referrals that come from our deans. All of the rest come from teachers, right? And so that's why I harped so much on tier 1, because that's universal. That's what happens in the classroom. That's not just the classroom, but how are they greeted when they walk in the door, right? All of those things are universal in tier 1, and that's why we need to address that. So I appreciate that. So what are we going to do about all this, right? And we talked about the need to address tier 1, and we're going to work on that with our MTSS teams, with our instructional leadership teams. But we also want to do more to support students. So the first program that we're going to talk about is an alternative to exclusion that would keep students in school as long as it's safe, right? Safety and security is always an important issue. But instead of having a student commit a severe incident and putting them out to think about what they did, which would have worked for me, right? It would have scared me. My parents would have been all over me. Not everybody has my parents at home, right? So instead of putting them out, let's keep them here on an altered schedule in a program to help them think through and address some of those issues. So we'll talk about Catalyst, and then we're hoping to bring in a substance abuse clinician. I use the word clinician intentionally because we want somebody who is licensed and has that clinical background, and we're really hoping that we can find somebody with a CADC certificate, which it really means that they've done time learning in an environment to support students through alcohol and drug use, right? And so we'll go through those as we go through here. So Catalyst program, and I'm not going to steal his thunder. So this is a program that exists currently in the Plainfield School District, and we're very fortunate here to have a wonderful counselor. I'm going to have him come over. Mr. Bowie is here at Central, and he started in the Catalyst program at Plainfield, and he did a great job throughout this whole year of going to, I think, anybody who would listen, including Mr. Hallahan and myself and Mr. Randich, and advocating for this. And in listening to him talk about it, his passion and his experience supporting students, I think is really powerful. So I'm going to ask him to come up and kind of just say a few words about his experience, why he thinks this is a good fit for our students. So Mr. Bowie, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Markham. Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Good evening.
As Mr. Markham said, I'm very passionate about this. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm pretty transparent. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but whatever questions you have, please ask me. I can probably answer just about any question about this topic. So I guess a good starting point is just to kind of explain how I got involved in the Catalyst program. Graduating college, trying to find a job, working at Starbucks on Caterpillar and Jefferson Street, just trying to pay back student loans. My social worker from high school, her name was Cheryl Riccardi. Great social worker, definitely somebody that was a go-to person for me. Came up to me, saw me in Starbucks and said, listen, we're doing this program. Are you looking for a job? So I said, well, yeah, I mean, anything that pays more than Starbucks, I mean, I am looking for a job. So I didn't think she was serious, but she was, and they interviewed me, and they actually hired for me. And let me just be upfront. I had no intentions of going into education. That was not my goal, going out of college. But I did need the money, and I did need to pay back student loans, so I decided to take that job. So my first job in 2007 was working at Plainfield South High School as a teaching assistant in a Catalyst program. And so what I saw there for me was, I mean, I guess I can describe it. I was trying to think of how I would describe it as I was sitting there, trying to reflect on this. The way I would describe it is probably life changing. I thought I had it figured out on how education should go. And my experience sitting in Catalyst and listening to kids who were very much in crisis, processed that whole thing for 3 days, one-on-one with me and Cheryl, was a game changer. So much of a game changer that I decided to go to Lewis and get my counseling degree and pursue education. So Catalyst, I think, does a lot of really good things. I can talk a lot of good things about what it can do for kids. It keeps them in school. It gives them an opportunity to kind of reflect on what's going on, where there's not a lot of distractions around, which I think is very important. A lot of times kids, they want to be distracted, they want to be around their friends, they want to be on their cell phones. And Catalyst, we nix that opportunity, which gives them an opportunity to really think about what it is that they did and how to do things differently. And I think that's an important part of this, because if you look at our data when I was working at Plainfield South, I would say about 90 to 95% of our kids never violated what we called a critical 3 incident again, meaning that there was no fights, there was no weapons, there was no drugs, nothing. We're not sitting here saying that they were perfect angels, and it's not going to fix everything, but once they went through the process of being with us for 3 days, and the follow-up group procedures and the other interventions that follow, we were able to keep those kids in school and connected to their environment. So it was very effective in that way. But it was also effective for the adults as well, because, going into the program, I was pretty much a punitive person. I was all for suspensions, pretty much from what Mr. Markham said. I was never afraid of the dean. I was never afraid of my teachers. I was always afraid of my parents. And when somebody made a phone call home to my parents, I knew I was going to be in trouble if that situation happened. But what I learned in this program is that we don't really live in that world anymore, and our parents are busy, they're working. Not that they don't care, but the world has changed where, there's not a lot of stay-at-home moms. Like my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So our parents and our families need some support. And this is another way to support them. One thing that I would like to add to this is that what I saw, which I didn't realize that I was going to see, is the trust we were able to build with our families. Because I think what happens is when we suspend kids for 10 days, it causes not only harm to that kid, but it causes harm to that family, and it just trickles down into the community, and it trickles down into those kids that turn into parents and then send their kids back to that school district, because they still have that in their minds. And when they have that in their minds, they're like, well, don't listen to those teachers, don't listen to those counselors, because they suspended me and expelled me from school. So they're probably going to be looking to do the same thing to you. So the trust it has been severed, and it's really hard to repair that. And when you have a program like the Catalyst program, which a lot of people think is like a touchy-feely program, it's not. But when you have a program like the Catalyst program, it allows you to connect that family and that student back to an environment where some students don't have that connection at all with anything else. So I think that I'll get off my soapbox about that. But that's essentially how I got involved into the program. I ran the program as well after 4 years of being the teaching assistant of the program. Cheryl Riccardi, who is the mastermind of the program, by the way, she's the one that created the program. She ended up having to retire early. She had breast cancer and she ended up passing away in 2012. I ended up taking over the position in 2011, and I stayed with the position until 2016. So some of my experiences are kind of old. I'm not sure how it's being done there. I've been here for 3 years and 3 years in another place, but I'm pretty sure the results are still pretty much the same. And feel free to interrupt me with questions if you have some, because you know I can talk forever. Why I think this is going to be effective, as a counselor here in the building of Joliet Central High School, I think someone mentioned, I think it was Mr. Markham, but it might have been somebody else. Our kids, they're experiencing a lot of trauma, and that trauma takes a lot of time to process. It's not a quick fix. It's not like you come into my office for 5 or 10 minutes, we process it, and they go back and they have a smile on their face. A lot of this takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of adult support. So sometimes it's going to take more than me, more than just a social worker, more than just a dean to look at this information. We have to wrap around these kids, and we have to build that repertoire with that kid moving forward. And I think if we're able to do that, we can be successful with bringing those kids back into the building. Another thing that I think that is going to be the reason why this is going to be better than suspending students is, at least in Plainfield, I'm not sure how it works here in Joliet. I'm still new. I'm still calling myself new, even though I've been here for 3 years. I'll add the pandemic into that newness. But in Plainfield, the selling point was money, really, actually, because keeping kids in the building actually saved our district money. And so every time a student was suspended or expelled from the school, it cost our district money. So the program was actually on a chopping block during the housing crisis, and I had to present to a board like this during that time to explain to them what it was that we were doing. And after talking to some of the board members, they explained to me, like, this is not only is this good for students in our community, but this also will save our district a lot of money. You know, even though you have to hire people to run it and things of that nature, it still saves the district money. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I can keep going.
Yeah, what's the scope of the program look like? Because you kind of said there was how many teachers aides, how many, like, what's the scope of the program look like?
Yeah, so every building in Plainfield was housed with one social worker or a counselor, and then you had a teaching assistant that helped man the ship while that counselor had to do one-on-one counseling or step out of the building to do something else. And so the scope of the program essentially is, well, let me just explain to you the components of the program. The components are academic counseling, group counseling, individual counseling. We also have community service, and we also process the incident. So for example, let's just say you have 2 students that get into a physical altercation. They would have a cool-off day, maybe a half a day, maybe a full day, depending on how serious it is. During that time, the dean and the catalyst coordinator will sit down with the parent, explain to them what happened, and offer them the catalyst program. Most parents would accept that because they want their kids in school and not out of school. And so once they would accept that, the kids would come back. Both kids in the physical altercation start on the same day. And the first thing that we would do in the program is have a mediation. Okay. And a lot of people, including a lot of teachers, say, whoa, what are we doing here? I mean, these 2 kids just got into a fight. You're putting them in the same room with each other for 3 days? That doesn't sound smart. And I didn't honestly think it was smart either until I saw it. And when we did it, I never, ever had a problem with those 2 students in there. Because once you take out the influences of their peers and social media and all that stuff, the kids just realized that what they were fighting over was pretty stupid, okay? And when you have trained people in that room to help them see that, it's very powerful. And I never sat there as a mediator to say, hey guys, this is stupid. They figured it out just by talking to each other. which they don't have an opportunity to do in a hallway where there's 100 people and there's a conflict there. So the mediation is done immediately. And then again, like I said, we participate in those components of academic counseling. A lot of these kids are far behind in school because this isn't, I mean, they've experienced other trauma. And then we process the incident, but we also process what's going on that led up to it. And a lot of times what I learned is that there was something else under the surface that nobody else knew about that was causing distress that led up to the fight to begin with, which you cannot see if you suspend them for 10 days. Essentially, you kick them out, they sit at home and mull over it for 10 days, and they come back, and then they're 10 days behind and have to catch up with all this stuff, and it's just, it was a disaster. In the Catalyst program, the teaching assistant, which I did my first 3 or 4 years of it, we helped them catch up with their homework, get them back on track. We coordinate things with their teachers. We have tutors come into the program to get them back on track. I'm bouncing all over the place. I apologize for that. Did I answer the question?
You did. I actually have another follow-up one
Yes.
based on that. So that all sounds great. How much ability do we have to be proactive with this too, right? Like if there's rumblings that there's gonna be a fight, how can we get kids involved in that so that we don't even have the physical altercation to begin with, right? That they might be able to come to that resolution easier. How could we utilize this program to do something like that?
That's a great question. I'll just tell you what we did. Because I don't have a perfect answer to that. Because you're right, we are responding to a serious incident. So what would happen is that let's just say 2 kids get into a physical altercation. We're not being proactive. We're reacting to their fight, right? But what happens then is there are other conflicts that come up, right? There's other things that come up, and they also have friends, and they say, "Hey, Mr. Bowie, me and you built this really good relationship, but I got my friend over here, Susie. She wants to get into a fight too. Can you help her out?" So then they bring them to the program. Then we're able to utilize those same skills because they just saw it working with themselves. So yeah, it doesn't really fix that situation, the first one, but it has the potential to spread across our community as an effective tool besides them getting into
So the
a
kid
fight.
could then help them, or could they get referred to the program? Like if there's possibly going to be a fight, right? Like if there's rumblings of that, can they be referred to the program? to do
Yes,
some
both,
sort of
both. At least how we did it in Plainfield.
Okay.
What would happen is that the dean would utilize the Catalyst coordinator to do a mediation.
Perfect. So there's the potential for it to be just as proactive as it is to be reactive.
That's correct.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you, first of all, for presenting and giving us your insight with such passion. Some of the names that when I was going through the presentation at home, I was pretty impressed by, including you, and I've heard your name before. Thank you for everything that you're doing at JT. I just want to say Annie Highsaw was one of your interns, and she now works for the University of Wisconsin Children's Hospitals, and I graduated with her. And then Josh Bloodgood, I wanted to take his job. He was already in LCSW back when I graduated too.
Yeah.
And they're just 2 people that I really respect and admire, and everything you've done at the Catalyst program. It was started while I was in grad school, so
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for all the work that you did, and it has made a significant difference in the lives of kids in Plainfield. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I gotta give my buffs to the social workers because they're the ones that created, particularly Cheryl Riccardi. Cheryl had a vision, and this wasn't something that she just kind of came up randomly. She put in a lot of research with this program, okay? And I wish I can take some of that credit, but I didn't. I came in when all the hard work was done. She had already pitched it to the district. The district accepted it. They piloted it at Plainfield South, and she was the mastermind behind it. So all props to Cheryl because she was really a remarkable person. Yeah. One more thing I want to add into this. So when the kids go through the program for the 3 days, I know we were talking about being proactive. It's important to know that this program isn't some program that kind of operates in the corner somewhere. Everybody else continues to do their thing, and then we just kind of operate with nobody knowing what's going on. Okay. The really big part of this program is connecting the people and the resources of the building to the program and vice versa, okay? Letting those kids know that there are stuff in our building that can help them. So maybe a kid wouldn't directly be able to connect to me, but maybe they could connect to their dean or their counselor in a way that they wouldn't have the opportunity to do before, utilizing our program, okay? What we used to utilize a lot is having counselors come up there anytime their kids would get into an altercation or bring drugs to school or have a weapon. We would reach out to that counselor to have them come talk to their kids, or we'd reach out to the dean to have them come talk to those kids. And we thought that that was a very powerful thing because it's one thing with them building that relationship with that one catalyst person, but it's another thing with building 5 relationships throughout the building. And so we feel like it's very important to have other people involved into this, not having it kind of operate on its own island. So yeah, that's it.
Mr. Bowie,
Yes.
love the program. So would you say that it was not very hard to convince the parents to put the child into this program compared to now having them go out and then try to come in?
Come like when we're pitching the program to them once they get into some.
Trouble, like we might go send them out and come into problem-solving circles and various things and restorative practices compared to trying to get a hold of them right now and try to keep them in the building to do this.
Okay, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I think, so in Plainfield, it was a very easy sell for our parents. But I think that the reason why it was an easy sell is because we had built up some trust with our families, and so families talk and people talk. And even though when they came into the program, it was a tense situation. People are mad. Parents are mad. People, some parents feel like, the school is targeting their kids, or this kid was targeting their kid, or whatever the situation was. But because we built up that trust, it was an easy sell for them to accept their kid to be in that program, and they felt like it was the best opportunity for their kid. Now, here in this district, I don't know what that trust really looks like, so I can't really answer that question. We may have trouble with getting kids into the program just based on the level of trust we have between families in our school. I'm just going to be honest and quite frank. But I think this is an opportunity to start to repair that. And it's going to take some hard work to repair that if that is the case. But once we repair that, I think you're going to see more and more families saying, okay, this is what's good for me. And they're not trying to set me up or anything like that. I may have had a bad experience when I was in school, but they're trying to flip things around and do things a little bit differently. Did that answer your question, or am I?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Thank you guys very much. You guys have a good night.
Other questions that you're much better at speaking to this than I am. I think you should get his admin license and take my job. Just some other data points. So Mr. Bowie shared that in his time at Plainfield South, he felt, and we looked at a presentation that he did to their board. He talked about when they were looking at making cuts. And I remember the number from that presentation was around 90% success rate. We did a field trip to Plainfield East. They shared the data from all 4 of their high schools from 2019, 2020. So just to give you an idea, they had an 89% success rate, meaning that students who participated in the program did not recommit another severe incident, right? Compare that to where we're at right now, where only 70% of our students this year have not recommitted another offense, and we're not done with the school year yet, right? So that's 20% better than what we're at. And to Mr. Bowie's last point, I think it will take time to get to that success rate, but anything we can do to work towards it is important, right? So again, a lot of this Mr. Bowie already went into. The program goals: keep students in school, build that trust with students, not exclude them, and then try to gain that back, right? That's the real big theme here. Again, keeping in mind safety, right? He talked about the cool-off period before they come back. So if a fight happens at the end of the day, they're probably not coming back to Catalyst first thing in the morning, right? We're going to take that next day to work with the family and make sure that we can do it in a way that's safe. Some of the guidelines. So we know the other difference between Plainfield and Joliet is that our number of severe incidents is higher right now. That's our reality, right? So We want to be careful not to overburden the program. We want to make sure that we do it in a way that allows us to be successful. So for right now, we're looking at it as a one-time intervention. If you think back to our problem-solving circles program with Mr. Edmond referred to, that used to be a one-time intervention, and we found that we had the capacity to do it more, right? So in the future, maybe that's something that we can explore here, but right now we want to make sure that as many students as possible can get through it. And then some of these other things Mr. Bowie talked through already. Another difference that we would look at for Joliet versus Plainfield is that families who participate in this program in Plainfield sign what they call a last chance agreement. I think that generally our philosophy here is a little bit different. We're looking to minimize zero tolerance opportunities. And so we would work on a reentry contract to support the students in reentering the main building successfully. That's another difference. Of eligible event types, I listed these before as our severe incidents. Okay, again, with weapons, that's on a case-by-case basis and based on the threat assessment, based on your decision as a board. But when a student brings a weapon, if we're going to have them come back to school with the other safety protocols that we'll put in place, we think this would be an important program for them to complete. Some logistical considerations. There's a lot of logistics that go into a new program like this. So I have a general list of items that we have to work through as a team. Upon your approval to move forward with this, what we would look to do is form a leadership team at each campus that would start working together to have a general program handbook sort of approach. Mr. Bowie, of course, would be an important part of that team. We would work with the PPS coordinators in each building, school psychologist, social worker, dean counselor, so that we have a shared vision, because this will be new for us, and so we need multiple people to be able to support the new staff, right? So there's a lot for us to think through. Most of what we do is going to be, like all good educators, we're going to borrow from Plainfield and adapt to meet our needs. So the staffing requests, and Mr. Bowie talked about this earlier, we're looking to add 2 individuals per campus, one who has a type 73 license, which means they're either a school social worker or a school counselor. We would want them, when we go through and we do the interview process, we'll focus on individuals who have a background in student mediations, conflict resolutions, and an important aspect will be the ability to connect with our students and build positive relationships, right? That's really important. Mr. Bowie talked about it. I think you can get the feel from just meeting him now, his personality, that's what we're looking to duplicate, right? And don't ask him because he really likes being a counselor. So it won't be Mr. Bowie, but he will help us support our new people. And then a paraprofessional, which he talked about as a teaching assistant in Plainfield, just a difference in structure. It's the same sort of idea, right? The catalyst facilitator needs to be able to go out of the room to do those meetings with parents, to onboard, to go over the expectations, to do individual counseling for that student who comes to them before they get in their next fight. They need to be able to step away, so we need another person in the room with the students. A list of activities, again, he did a very nice job of going through all these, so I'm not going to bore you by reading to you. I also put in a schedule, so we've done some general work on thinking about what the logistics could look like, but it's really important that we don't just take Plainfield's model. We have to work with our team within the building to make sure that it fits with what we're able to do, right? So this is just a general idea of how it could look to show that with the staff, we can still meet the contractual needs, right? That we can still be within the contract to give plans and lunch. And so we'll work through the specifics, but this is just to give you an idea.
Hey, Mr. Markham, quick
Yes, sir.
question for that. So based on our scheduling, what would we do with like a freshman, right? Because I know we've got they start period 1, and then our contracts, we've got some teachers who are 1 through 7, others are 2 through 8. What would they just go on the 2 through 8 schedule then if they had an issue?
So that's one of the things that we have to talk about, right? In Plainfield, the family's part of their agreement to participate is they provide the transportation, and they start after arrival and leave before dismissal, again, for that safety and security to minimize the interruptions. What we have to have a philosophical conversation about is, in our community, is that possible? And if not, what does that look like, right? So we have some work to figure that out, but if it's a freshman, it would be in that 2 through 8 range. Arrival and dismissal is one of those logistics we have to work through.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then proposed funding source, unfortunately, for Dr. Hampton, this is not free, but we're proposing to use our evidence-based funding. because we, in talking to Plainfield and listening to Mr. Bowie and talking to our deans about what they need to do restorative practices, we believe that this is something that we need to be able to sustain long-term. And so instead of going through the intermediate step of using some of that ESSER and ARP funding, we're proposing just to use evidence-based funding and really commit to it early. And then I think it's really important to acknowledge, this is, Mr. Bowie talked about not taking the credit for the program. I'm taking 0 credit. This all came to us from him. It came from his mentor. And so they all deserve that credit. I think where Mr. Bowie is going to get the credit is when we do this and when we do it well. It will be because of his passion and because he brought it to us. And so I think that's important for us to acknowledge. Additionally, Plainfield has been great. Tim Alborz, who has a role similar to mine there, sent me every document they have, right? So when we talk about those logistics, we have what they use. I talked about our field trip that Mr. Narducci and Mr. Villaflor and I did to Plainfield East to look at the space that they use, to talk to them about their experience. And then Josh Bloodgood, who Ms. Guerrero-Newmayer talked about, worked closely with Mr. Villaflor when he was in Plainfield, and he's been a good resource to bounce ideas off of and talk about his experience. Any other questions about Catalyst?
I don't really have a question. I appreciate that, we're adding another tool to the toolbox, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing is clearly we haven't seen success with some of the other stuff. Exclusionary discipline is going to happen, right? There is going to be time and place for that, but I think this is another good way to hopefully reach more kids, get to more kids, and help decrease those opportunities for exclusionary discipline. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Mr. Bowie.
So you would be the initiator and the overseer of the program at both campuses, correct?
So the way it'll work, I talked about that leadership team, right? I think it's important that we have a shared vision, much like we do curriculum work, right? So we need to have a shared vision, but Mr. Randich, Mrs. Parker, and I we meet together weekly. We have a standing meeting, but I think I talk to them 3 or 4 times. I think I talk to them more than I talk to my wife, honestly. And so we would collaborate on the shared vision, but it would be the building's program to run as they need to meet their needs, right? So I don't need to be in micromanaging, but I would hope to be an important part of that and supporting the staff in helping to bring resources to them. I'm hoping to write my dissertation on this, so I will definitely be involved, right? But it'll be a collaborative team effort. And each building, it might look different in the buildings, right? So that I hope that when we're here talking about how great this is in the future, you'll hear from West and Central about what their program and implementation looks like.
Then I have a follow-up question then. I'd like to ask Mr. Bowie, was that the same there? Was the different buildings doing different things? Were they making it adaptable to the different buildings, or did everybody from Plainfield 202 do all the same thing?
Great question. So we did it exactly the same way. We adapted our program based on what our needs were. In Plainfield, there's 4 high schools. Plainfield South had a different demographic than, say, Plainfield North. Plainfield South, as you may or may not know, is actually located in Joliet, but it's just on the far west side of the Joliet area. And we were a working class family. So our kids came to us with different stuff. And so our numbers look different, and our issues were handled a little bit differently. And there was a little bit different buy-in for that as well, because in Plainfield, there was a lot of movement. So what I noticed is that, you would have some buildings that would really be gun-ho for Catalyst, and then there was other buildings that weren't so much. And I think that was because new people would come in and not really understand what the components of the program was. And I'll just add one quick example. So we talked about transportation. We noticed that a lot of our families couldn't take off work to take their kid to school to meet those requirements. We recognized that it was important to take our kids away from their peer groups for 3 days because we felt like that was a reflection time for them. So we needed to work around that. So what we did is we built 2 schedules. Some kids could walk to school, some kids can get dropped off, and then other kids could take the bus. But then the teaching assistant, which was me for 4 years, would go meet them right at their bus, grab them, and take them directly up to the program. So that allowed us to still utilize the transportation, but at the same time, not have them walking around in the hallways, which we didn't want them doing after a physical altercation.
Just to add some, because as Mr. Bowie said, it's been a long time since he was there, right? 6 years, you said?
Since 2016.
2016, yeah, so about 6 years. When we talked to, some of the data that they shared points to that they did more norming around what the program looks like, the resources that they use. But again, just like he's talking about, the needs of the schools are different. That's true here. The skill sets of the program facilitator are going to be different, right? And so standardize as much as possible with the flexibility to meet the need of the student in front of you is important. Any other questions about Catalyst? Thank you all. Mr. Bowie, it's late, man. Feel free to go. I can talk for
Thank
a
you
long
so
time.
much.
All right, so the last addition that I want to talk through is our a substance abuse clinician potentially for the district. I do want to point out, this is not a common position in public schools to have a substance abuse clinician. In my research, I asked this question at, we have through the ROE, Student Services Networking meeting. Nobody there had it. A lot of people talked about why they don't have it. There is one school district that I found who does have it. Crete-Monee High School has a substance abuse clinician. Fortunately, the assistant superintendent there is in my cohort, so I was able to get that job description. And one of our counselors from West Campus, Miss Alexander, worked there, and she actually is the one who pointed me in that direction. So again, using our staff is great about bringing resources forward. So in those conversations and looking at our data, I think it's something worth us considering. So the rationale, we went over all the data. I don't need to go over it again. There's been an increase in substance abuse, and at a time when our staff is seeing more students in crisis. And so a student who is bringing drugs to school or who is under the influence, that's a time-consuming conversation. And so I think we need to increase our resources to meet those needs. It also, I would say that possession of a substance in school is a safety and security issue, and we want to get out in front of that as much as possible. So the reality is that there's no way that one person coming to this district will be able to do individual counseling for every student who brings a vape pen to school. That's our reality, right? Now, I would say that hopefully we get to a point where they can do a lot of that, but for now, a big part of the role is to coordinate the supports with our community agencies, to give some relief and support to our PPS coordinators and our BHT leads. The BHT leads right now, at each campus, there's a partnership liaison. It's one of our social workers. That's a non-paid position, and they give up some of their work time to do that. This is somebody who can help to coordinate that and facilitate that. And then they could incorporate into that BHT process to be a support. Remember that we talked about this being a licensed person with some clinical background, and so that would be an addition to our team to be able to meet the needs of our students. So again, the staffing request is for one person for the district for now, because we want to be responsible with making this decision. You know, I think it would be, we could definitely make an argument to have a person in each campus, but we want to make sure that when we add a new position like this, that it's sustainable and that we can do it with fidelity and effectively, so that we're being responsible with our finances, so that we can, next year when Dr. Hampton's up here, that report looks as good as it did this year, right? So the licensing requirements, we're looking at a type 73 school social work license, because that's required to work in a school, and an LCPC or an LCSW, strongly preferred, right? I think we'll have to see what the applicant pool looks like, because again, it's not common. So we don't want to limit ourselves too much, but obviously that C stands for clinical. That's important in this position. And then the CADC, which is a certification where they do internship work in a drug and alcohol counseling setting, strongly preferred, right? Strongly preferred.
I just want to say again, I mean, getting one, I want to wish you all the luck in the world. Right now, I'm just saying, there's only 2 LCSWs we have right now working for the county. I'm the only one that is a type 73, and I'm finishing my CADC, and we don't even have a CADC program at JUCO. You have to go out of county, and JUCO represents several counties around here, and you still have to go to COD as the closest place. So it's gonna be tough, but you can do it if anyone can, Brett.
Oh, I appreciate that. Fortunately for us, what gives me hope is that we do have one social worker on staff who has all of these things. She is a social worker. She has an LCSW. She has a CADC. So if needed, maybe we can convince her, right? But that gives me hope that there are other people out there who want to work in a school who have those backgrounds.
To clarify, I meant Will County government, not Will
Right?
County.
No, I know,
Yeah.
I know what you meant, but I just,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe because I know how challenging that is. And I talked about the staffing challenges that our partners are facing, right? So the fact that we have somebody here who has that already gives me some hope. The responsibilities, again, we're in the early stages of talking about what this looks like in practice. So there's a lot of work to do and teamwork, team planning on the logistics. But this is just a list of things that could be responsibilities for this individual. If you all feel like this is good for us to pursue, we'll work on cleaning up job descriptions, working with the union, making sure that we can do it. And then upon full approval, we would work on what does it look like for this person to operate successfully in our system. But just to give you an idea of the things they can do, I talked about collaborative planning, coordinating services, working with behavioral health teams, doing the initial assessment of a student who is in possession to then determine what the level of support they need is. When I talk to our clinical staff who we have here currently, a lot of people talk about substance abuse as a manifestation of a mental health issue, right? With adolescents, you can see addiction, but it's more likely that they're coping with a mental health problem, right? So this person could do that assessment and point them in the direction of the supports that we have available already. So again, this is something that we don't see as an issue that's going to go away quickly. And so instead of doing that intermediate step with the grants, we're proposing that we use evidence-based funding to support this program. I've talked at you long enough, but if you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything that you have.
I just want to say, I'm really excited that you're going to do your doctorate on some of the things that you just spoke to. Just your presentations in general. I want to do my doctorate on this and just steal all your stuff. Anyway, for everything from him asking you, your sample size, you knew your sample size, how to do it. You understood just different evidence-based techniques and all the way down to how groups are more effective when co-facilitated. A lot of folks don't know things like that. Having psychs doing the survey tools. That's what you're supposed to use them for. And so many districts, being an intern in 3, doing an intern position and being a school social worker, you cover all the bases and you do it really well. And I just want to say thank you. These were great presentations.
Appreciate that. I can't take all the credit. I have Dr. Ellis Bowen's been a great mentor. And it's all about, these came to me from individual conversations with our staff members about what they need, right? And that's one of the things that, having worked other places before I was an administrator here, I feel like is something that we try to do as a team as much as possible. So I appreciate that, but I can't take all the credit, right? This is a collaborative effort.
Any other questions for Mr. Markham? There's no action requested tonight because the staffing presentation next month would be inclusive of the positions that Mr. Markham talked about tonight. We just wanted to make sure you were able to digest and see if you have any questions specific about these recommendations that are to come. And our last presentation, thank you, Dr. Ellis Bowen, for your patience. And so Dr. Ellis Bowen is going to talk about additional supports that she has really been piloting and would like to put in a more structured fashion as we move forward.
All right, good evening, everyone. I was getting ready to say good morning, but we're not there yet. We're close. But thank you again for allowing me this opportunity to speak before you today. I want to take this moment and hopefully only the next 10 minutes outside of the questions that you may have, just to talk about special education programming as we have focused on re-engagement and reconnection of our students. So one of the things that we began to discuss, I would say back in November of 2021, was to begin to talk about how we can reconnect and re-engage our students due to remote learning and as well as COVID, the impacts of COVID. And one of the things that we wanted to focus on is beginning to reimagine how we provide services, because we had that opportunity to do so. We wanted to make sure that our students, as we received them back, were resilient, they were nimble, and they were also inquisitive. And so myself, along with my administrative team, various stakeholders such as counselors, social workers, as well as my school psychs and my IEP managers, we all began to talk about what that could possibly look like in regards to programming. So we wanted to focus on 5 areas. We wanted to focus on real world application, eliminating gaps by providing opportunities, exposure to mentorship, independent living, social skills and advocacy, again, re-engagement and reconnections, and last but not least, increased opportunities for peer connections and activities of interest. So the following programs that I am going to take a moment to talk about are programs that we have either been in existence since my tenure here at JTHS, or have started since post-COVID. So our first program is After the Peanut. This is a program that was founded by Dr. Natalie Coleman. She is a teacher. She was a former administrator. She is currently a Will County board member, as well as she would say, she is a STEM nerd. And this company was basically founded on providing knowledge and education in the face of adversity in the areas of STEAM education. So in our partnership with Dr. Coleman and her company this year, we provided after-school programming for our students, in which they were engaged in opportunities that provided access points for guided student inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking. So going back to that inquisitive and being nimble. So first semester, the length of the program was 4 weeks. It was at the West Campus. Again, it was after school for 2 days a week, and students focused on topics such as coding and gaming, robotics, forensics, and urban agriculture. As you may or may not know, our instructional students rarely have an opportunity to participate in these type of activities during the school day. So this was very important to us, for us to engage in a partnership that will allow them that exposure to careers as well as experience outside of the school day. We had about 5 students in each session, 5 to 7 students in each session for that 4 weeks. Second semester, the length of that program will be 8 weeks. The focus group for that will be our central campus, as well as our AVAC transition students. Again, 2 days a week, and they will focus on topics such as coding without robots, science and sports medicine, earth science and engineering, and financial literacy. Right now, we are estimating between 10 and 15 per session. All right, so first semester, the total cost was $16,000. Second semester is going to be a little $7,000 more, only because of the adaptations for our low incidence program. In addition to the program costs, we also have a paraprofessional that helps out with Dr. Coleman's staff, and they are paid per their hourly wage during that time. What we would like to do is look at future partnerships in regards to our working with Dr. Coleman for our instructional summer program, as well as ESY this year. And then last but not least, looking to hopefully send some of our students to some of the summer classes at Lewis University.
I'm
But-
sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Before you go on to the next one,
Mhm.
can I just say, After the Peanuts, an amazing program. I know several students and children of even some folks in this room that have gone through After the Peanut programs, and just saying IMSA started some of these like STEM programs, such as After the Peanut, like, several years ago, like a decade ago or whatever. And each student, for them to go individually, is like $600 to $800. You have to provide your own transportation, you have to provide your own lunch, you have to provide, I mean, just so much. And it was an hour drive just to go out there. And so this is it's an amazing program, and it's really helpful. And I'm just really excited. And I know you're going to talk about a few more programs here, but the other thing is, when we talk about wanting to improve and increase diversity, and having people that look like our children and who are creating programs for our children. Some of the folks listed, and you're not even finished yet, are African American, and I mean they're from our community. So it's like from our community, by our community, and just doing great things, and they're just role models. So I just want to say thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And
Awesome.
I learned about it through being on the board and through the principal reports. And
Awesome.
great program.
Awesome.
I have a question. Is there a reason that the second semester is more than 4 times the cost of the first semester?
For After the Peanut?
Yes.
Yes, so going back to that original statement, they will be working with our AVAC and transitional students, which is our low incidence population. And there are some adaptations that Dr. Coleman and her staff had to make in order for them to access and understand the information that's being provided to them. So that is not only going to change the curriculum that's being presented to them, but then also additional materials needed for instruction. Any other questions? All right. Okay, let's move on to Buddies Unite. All right, so again, during my tenure, we have been on the waiting list for Best Buddies, which is an international club that allows our low incidence population to have events and outings with their non-disabled peers. So we decided to take things into our own hands and create Buddies Unite. And this goal was, again, to create friendships with no boundaries, meaning that we wanted to create opportunities for non-disabled students and our students within AVAC and transition to create friendships and have those experiences that will hopefully last beyond their their years here. So with Buddies Unite, we only plan for 4 events, 2 events at West, 2 events at Central. Communication went out to our entire student body, along with the interest survey, which students were encouraged to complete. To date, we have over 80 students who have participated in our first 2 events, and we have garnered more general education students that can actually partner with our AVAC transition program. Yes.
I do want to comment. I think it's great that you guys are doing that at West as well. Because when I first started working here and working in the AVAC program, it's housed at Central. It's a district campus or district program. And it's great to actually get a lot of those kids who would normally be West students, but come down here for the program to allow them to go back to their home school and then get some exposure with some of those other, gen ed students who might not have exposure to that. So that's really great. So thank you for that.
No problem. We have really been focusing on district-wide programming, especially for our students at the West Campus that would benefit from some of the programming that we offer at Central.
Sorry, can I ask a question? With Buddies Unite, is this the same program that worked with some of the other area high schools like Lincoln Way during some of their Buddies programs that they have? Because there was at least a Steelman mascot at my stepdaughter's school last year with AVAC students, and I was wondering if that was the same program.
So I don't think so. That might have been, is your daughter in grammar school or is she in high school?
She was a senior at Lincoln Way.
Oh, so that was, oh God, special, yes.
I was just wondering.
So,
That's what her program is
So
called
that-
there.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
run through like the adaptive PE programs.
Got it.
So it's kind
Yes.
of more like a field day for a lot of the adaptive
Yes.
PE.
yeah, it's like I call it a mini Special Olympics day. Yep.
Her program is Buddy something, so I was just wondering. All right, thank you.
No problem. So with Buddies Unite, we actually have our next event, which will be at the West Campus on the 23rd. And then our last event will be at the Central Campus on March the 7th. All right, so our next program, we went into partnership with them over the summer. And our students, I can't say how they received Involved Inc. and the mentorship. So Involved Inc. is an organization that empowers students to strive towards emotional wellness and success. This company was founded by David Collins, who is one of our own. He is an English teacher here, and his mother, Teresa Collins. They have provided curriculum and services to Joliet 86, to River Valley Detention Center, as well as other local organizations surrounding the Joliet area. So as we have extended our partnership beyond the summer into the regular school year, basically what happens is this is a tier 3 intervention. Students are identified through our behavioral health teams, and then they work with Mrs. Collins during the school day. She is at West, or will be at West for 2 days a week, and then she will be at Central for 2 days a week for 2 periods. And basically during this time, she will basically, again, be providing emotional wellness and healing and creating a safe and supportive educational learning environment to empower students. So again, the length of the program is 12 weeks each semester. And right now we are at a cost of a little bit over $27,000 for each semester. And the program will resume on February 21st. Any questions about Involved Inc.? Okay. All right. Also, a new program that has stemmed from us looking at data. So we have been looking at what we call our bag data, our behavior, academic, attendance, and grade data. And one of the things that came out of this is that we had some students that really needed that in-time support. And although we were offering the virtual tutoring, as well as the graduation 2.0, our special ed students were not taking advantage of those supports. So we wanted to do something different and offer in-person just-in-time supports for our SPED students. So basically what happens is that students either come on their own or they are referred from a teacher to come in and complete homework, makeup assignments, or just for basic executive function or organization. Again, after school assignment recovery is available for walk-ins or teacher assigned basis. This our ASAR allowed us to decrease our numbers of students that needed credit recovery over the winter, which was also a support that our special ed students were not taking advantage of. And so we were able to see over 52 students, and this was like within 2 weeks, because we were only able to offer it for 2 weeks because it was a really quick turnaround of students that came in and was able to bring up their grades from a D or F all the way to a C. So they did really, really amazing. So we are looking to continue this program beginning next week. All right. Any questions about after-school recovery program? All right. Our Health Matters program. So this was an Illinois State Board of Education grant awarded program that we were awarded in January. We were one of 10 governmental organizations out of the entire state to receive this grant. This grant will assist our students with focusing on nutrition, health, wellness, and fitness for our low incidence population or for our students with intellectual or developmental disabilities. So what this program will look like, there will be 6 staff members that will participate in training during this month. It is a 12-week program. They will meet with students 3 times a week for 2 hours after school. There will be an exercise class for 60 minutes 3 times per week, and then a health education class for anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes per week, 3 times a week as well too. And then also with everything we do, there's a program evaluation, so before and after the program. And so this program is free. We were awarded that grant, so the only thing that we will be paying for will be the certified staff training, $39 an hour working with as well as working with our students, and then the classified staff that will be working with the program, our paraprofessionals. All right, any questions about that? All right. All right, Redeem Connections. I have to admit, this is probably my favorite partnership that we have for our students with special services, only because it incorporates vocational experiences and exposures. And then it was our first opportunity to provide a paid internship for our students. So Redeem Connections is a nonprofit organization which was founded by Reverend Adrian Heath, who is a community member within Joliet. Within Redeem Connections, our students go through an 8-week paid preparation training program in the area of lawn maintenance. So they learn how to not only cut the grass, but they learn chemical treatments. They learn about planting as well as other things during this 8 weeks. Also during this 8 weeks, he also takes them through interviewing, how soft skills, skills necessary to not only obtain but also retain a job as well too. As well as mentorship. He has been a really great mentorship to some of our students who have gone through the program. So for this partnership, this will be our 3rd year going into this partnership. In 2018, 2019, we had 9 students. Of course, the 19-20 year, the program was canceled due to COVID. Then last year, we were able to do a soft startup with 5 students, and then we are anticipating 15 students for this program. The students do have to go through an interviewing process with Reverend Heath and one of the coordinators, and then there's a selection process for them to go through and be hired. This year, what we are adding on to it is that they are going to have to sign a contract saying that they are going to participate throughout the entire summer. Also, one of the exciting things about this partnership is that there is exit celebration at the end of the program, in which the students get into full gear of a graduation cap and gown. And it is one of the best award ceremonies that I have ever seen for our students. Our internship stipend is at $2,112 for our students, and this is for the entire 8-week program. Also, as part of this program, we also hire an assistant, a student assistant teacher. This is usually one of our students who went through the program the previous year. And then we also have a program fee of $12,800. It should say 800 instead of 8,000. Sorry about that. So we look at a total cost for this program at $23,360. Any questions about Redeem Connections? All right. All right, additional programs and activities. So JJC Culinary Experience, this has been in existence since I have been here. This is where we have provided JJC certification classes for our students at our transition center, which has included cleaning, sanitation, cold foods, culinary, hot foods, as well as we also at one time provided students with horticulture, and we're hoping to start that up for next school year. One of the accommodations that we have had to make, because JJC has yet to open up their building to our students and staff, is that now JJC comes to us in our new facility, because we actually now have not only the capacity, but we have the things needed in order for the culinary experience with our new industrial kitchen. You would think that I'm not in the kitchen cooking all the time. All right. But the associated costs with that each semester is a little bit over $2,800. And we are looking to continue that. And then what was new for us this year was the AVAC sports team experience. At the time when we resumed in-person services, we were not sure if we were going to have Special Olympics. So Mrs. Shanks and her staff began to work with the two the assistant principals for athletic director, to see if our students can begin to be involved with practices with our teams. And so first semester, we were able to do football, cheer, dance, volleyball, basketball. There were pictures all over the website. And the associated costs for this were the $39 for certified staff that assisted with supervision during that time, as well as with classified staff. And then as we end, I place funding sources of where the deliverables are paid out of. And so after the peanut comes out of IDEA and our new ESSA IDEA account, Best Buddies Unite will come out of IDEA. After our after school recovery program will come out of IDEA. Involved Inc. has come out of IDEA for first semester. Second semester, it will come out of IDEA ESSER. Our Health Matters program will come out of IDEA. Our Redeem Connections comes out of our STEP grant, as well as IDEA. And then last but not least, our additional programs and activities will either come out of IDEA or our ESSA IDEA. Any questions? I tried to go as fast as I could.
I don't have a question, but I do have a compliment, right? Because I think that most people don't understand when you provide general ed students extracurricular opportunities, you're supposed to provide, we're practicable, right? The same opportunities for our kids with special needs. And I think our district goes well above and beyond that and exceeds expectation. And I want to thank you for the work that you put into that, because this is a huge amount of stuff that we offer our kids. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do so, for allowing myself and my team. My team is awesome, and I have been very blessed to serve them for the past 8 years.
I just want to add that like a lot of, it's so refreshing to see how involved our community is with our students and how like a lot of planning and creative thinking and thinking outside the box, the Miss Alice Bones team has really just spread out and just leveraged all the supports that are available in our community to help all our students. So thank you for doing that.
I also would like to inform you that one of your teachers from West called me to come out and provide some services to the occupational.
Yep. Our OVE classes.
Yes. So we're in the works with that, just to let you know. So thank you.
Awesome.
Dr. Ellis Bowen does a really great job of finding the partnerships within the community. When she came to us, she wasn't from Joliet, but she certainly found everybody in Joliet who could, in the area and beyond, who can continue to support our students. So we appreciate the work she does, and thank you for, there's a lot of information here, and I know that there's been a lot of work that's gone into that, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
That concludes our reports.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. So, thank you, Superintendent. We go to our action items. A, the MOU between the JTHS and One Go. Can I get a motion to approve? Second? No, any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn? Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
And Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve the recommendation of SSP?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn? Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Lord have mercy. Second reading on board policies, 1, 2, 3. One, two, three, and all the alphabets.
So moved.
Double G or triple G.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Stiff, and then Mrs. Lynn seconded, correct?
Right.
Yes. Miss-
Any questions?
Okay, I apologize. I just can't hear down here. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Motion to approve legal board meeting dates.
Motion.
Second.
Question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Motion to approve E, personnel reports, 1 through 14.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Student discipline recommendation policy.
Expulsion hearing board, sorry. Expulsion Hearing Board recommendations, February 15th. After receiving and deliberating the information contained in the hearing officer's report, the Board of Education is charged with deciding, one, whether removing the child from his or her learning environment is in the best interest of the school. Two, what the rationale is for the specific duration of the recommended expulsion. Three, whether all appropriate and available behavioral and disciplinary interventions were exhausted. And four, whether the continued presence in school would either A, pose a threat to the safety of other students, staff, or members of the school community, or B, substantially disrupt, impede, or interfere with the operation of the school. The Board of Education must then convene into public session to formally vote on the motion to expel if the expulsion is a consensus arrived at during executive session. Case number W212218, recommended expulsion until January 2023, placement at Lincoln School.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Abstain.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Finished business? No? Right. New business?
Oh, sorry. Sure. So I received a question regarding the district's procedure with foreign exchange students. And so this was added to the agenda. Just for your reference, the policy that governs foreign exchange students is 750, if you would like to look at it. But there's just a small section in there. The question I received is how many foreign exchange students do we currently allow to come into the district? And I checked into this because as long as I can remember, and then those I was working with too, this has been in place for a while. The limit is currently one student at each building. According to policy, there's a portion in this area and it just says the Board of Education may limit the number of exchange students admitted to any given year. Exchange students must comply with district immunization requirements. Once admitted, exchange students become subject to all district policies and regulations governing students. Based on just conversations with administrators who have been in positions longer than I in the district, my understanding is that it's limited due to our current enrollment numbers. The fact that we're still an underfunded district when you look at finances, even though I think it's very apparent that we do a lot with what we have. So I just wanted to share the information, and then I was asked to put on the agenda for board discussion.
I don't really know what to say here. The question came up because there's a family who wished to have a foreign exchange student, and they were informed that they already have one and the student cannot enroll. And so this is someone who pays taxes that comes to our district, and I don't think that's fair to only have one exchange student per school.
3,400 students, that's a low ratio.
Someone who has had foreign exchange students in my home before, I think it'd be a valuable experience for not only the child, the student themselves, but for all the students in the classes with this child to learn. And I think it would be a valuable learning experience for not only students, but teachers and administration to have more students from different countries in our school.
For sure. Really quickly though, do we know why it was limited to one? What?
Potentially, I mean, I don't think I can speak to, it's been in place for a long time. So again, not opposed. I think it would probably be something, if the board wanted to increase that we just evaluate. I could work with administrators at putting in a timeline, because we do need to know in advance. And sometimes there's different ways that foreign exchange students can come to. It could be that a family looks for one, but there's also companies, and companies will just keep calling us. And some companies are better to work with than others. I've learned that too. So we certainly could increase the number. I think we just want to make sure we're evaluating and making sure that we put in procedures in place. Because also what has happened too, sometimes this happened this year. So sometimes a person in the community has a foreign exchange student, and they are going somewhere else, and then it doesn't work out. And this year we were able, because we didn't have a spot taken at one of our campuses, and so they were able to attend. But we would want to have some procedures and deadlines and timelines like that too in place. So I can work with the building on that. What is the board? I mean, because according to policy, the board limits the number. So what sounds appropriate as we're looking to expand this? Because I wouldn't want it to just open up to unlimited.
So do we have any data on how many requests we get per year?
Ms. Stiff, I agree with you on the unfairness, but I think I didn't understand that companies are calling us. I think we should distinguish, if we're going to do this, distinguish between a taxpayer having a foreign exchange student and some company sending us kids because we'll take them.
Dr. Gibson, I know you worked in the registrar's office for a long time.
There's companies that are.
They're like the liaison.
Like the liaison.
Yes.
And so they're finding families and they're placing the student with those families and then also like working with the school. So, and there's several different organizations that are in that business. To my recollection, every contact we've had, not to say that parents don't call and say, hey, I want this, but like all the paperwork has been done like via the companies that they're working with. And like the whatever visa.
And I've done that for a year, right? But the student went to JCA, and all the students, there were multiple kids that came from China that went to JCA. So I'm just curious why, we can't have more foreign exchange students.
I think we should do our due diligence on that, but I would think it should be increased. Only reason why I say increase more than one, because of the comfortability of at least having another one, at least having two in one school, so that they can have some kind of.
Can we base it off the percentage of population of the school percent? Like whether it be 1%, 2%? So that way we don't have like a particular number of 3 kids, but base it off the percentage of the population.
It could be whatever the board would like it to be. I think we'll just have to come up with the procedures and the deadlines to make sure we're still, we're giving the kids what they need and that they're not coming in later and then not getting the schedule that works for them too. So it's certainly.
Okay.
Do you want me, how about I talk with my team and I come back with maybe a recommendation? Next time that we can work through and just with a number that we can accommodate going into next year?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Board reports? No. Don't look like we have an audience of left.
We did have one person sign up for public comment, but I don't think she's here. Leanne Ryan.
No? Well, I'm excited to say, can I get someone?
Yeah,
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kennedy,
yes.
Mrs. Lynn, Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer,
Yes.
Mr. Bean,
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Thank you.
We thank you all for your patience.
Let me defrost here.
Have a tremendous day, rest of your night.
The last time I was in here, it was extremely hot.
That's why we have it in the upcoming project